Alright guys, what is going on? Spartan D here. Now, I've been getting a lot of questions about how do I build a team? What do I need in my team? I can't pass X chapter or X quest. How do I do that? Well, what I've typically been telling people is to get 2 DPS, 1 designated healer, and 1 utility. Now this could vary. You could have 1 DPS, 2 utility, and 1 healer. You might be asking, okay, so what classifies as utility? Utility can be classified as a lot of things. Let's go ahead and take Monica for instance here. So what she does, crowd control, stuns, that right there is utility. The fact that she mitigates damage through her shield, that right there is utility. So I would generally tell people, and I have been telling people, you go for what you want, but for, later on in content, you're gonna want to have someone like Monica in your arsenal, or Ryu. Reason being, as it stands right now, these two are the only ones who can mitigate damage. Monica more so than others. So at base level, she can taunt all nearby enemies when you switch to her, and you reduce all sources of damage by 60%, and it goes up to around 3.5k damage from each source, meaning different sources of damage, be it physical damage or magic damage. Those are 2 different sources of damage, so they do not count towards the same 3.5k damage that you mitigate. That is very important to note. So upon switching, as it says there, it takes about 500 MP, which is a lot. And the longer you have it up, the quicker the gauge depletes. So you want to be incredibly cautious when using this. And you really only want to swap it in the very moment you're about to take damage, and then immediately swap out as soon as you possibly can. You can do this up to about 3 times before it's completely depleted, because there's slight regeneration in between those times, so you get about 3 charges if you do this correctly, which is pretty huge. Also, while it's active, for every 2 incoming attacks, a magic circle is generated, and it stacks up to 3 times within a 4-yard radius max. So that's about, it's a couple of steps outside of where the barrier is, but I'm pretty sure it's including the barrier because it doesn't reach that far. Now, when you swap to a different weapon, this is important, that you have to take damage in order for this to proc. Otherwise, it will not proc, and you'll simply swap. But if you do this correctly and you take damage, you have to take at least 2 hits for this to proc. And what will happen is all the enemies within that radius, they get knocked up into the air. They also get stunned. That's basically what it is. The knock up is the stun. And you recover about 12% of your max HP times 4, the amount of enemies that you knock up. maximum of 4, it seems, and it's based off your max HP. So it's pretty good. But one thing to note is when you have this shield active, you cannot, and I mean you cannot do anything. You can't attack. It's a shield, and your movement speed is reduced by 50%, but you're not using it for that function. So that's probably one of the best. For all intents and purposes, she is the best damage mitigator in the game. Reason being is when you max her out, when you max this out, when you awaken this, it turns from 60% to 90%. So you essentially take 0 damage. You take no damage. So is it worth investing in? Honestly, it's good at base, and you could probably leave her alone for a while and focus on others. It's not really a priority to have Monica go from 60% damage mitigation to 90%. Is honestly that is not a big deal right now. For later on, for later content, I'm sure it will be. For right now, not really. But this is the reason why I would say Monica should be the unit that you go for. When you start the game, once you reach chapter 1-4, they give you a reroll ticket, and you can continuously reroll until you get an SSR of Monica in this shield. Alright. You also can get Chio. Now, we'll dive in a bit about Chio. I'm not exactly too high on her, though she is pretty good. You also can get Beatrice, or Heaven's Roses, and you can get Aluga with her Narukami. Now, it's a decent pool, right? Monica obviously has the most utility, and she can also do quite a bit of damage with her active skill. Her active skill is pretty crazy. You do 530% of your physical attack. It's pretty good. It hits twice. It stuns the target. It's really good. It's really good, especially if your team is more physical oriented. Which you can do, but it's easier to run a magic team, and I'll get into that once we start talking about team building. Now, Chio's pretty interesting in how her weapon functions. It's really odd. Her normal attacks deal 80% of the target's attack. Now, the wording on this is weird. The way it's worded is effectively saying, you know, the person that you're attacking, not necessarily your attack, which is weird. Right? So that gets factored in as pure damage, which I consider, you know, true damage. And what that essentially means is it does not matter what their defense is, this damage will always go through. Thing about it is there's also the normal attack itself and how it functions to calculate. So you would think that it would be really good and does a ton of damage, but since it's reliant on the enemy's attack power, it's a bit wonky in the way that it functions. So she has more of a niche use in the sense of whatever enemy you're facing, the more attack that they have can be used against them, which is pretty good, especially if they're also really tanky against, you know, physical damage or just damage in general. That's usually the type of content where she will shine best in. Now, would I recommend her? Yes and no. I feel like there are better options which we're about to explore. So Beatrice, reason being is you want, when you're building your teams, you want a witch to fulfill multiple roles. You don't want them to fill just one role. You know, the general roles, again, DPS, utility, healing. Those are the three. There could be a fourth, but not really. People say like tank, which is a thing. It has to do with like your max HP and just, you know, the stats of the witch in general. Some are tankier than others, but that just generally falls into the utility category since they generally fulfill a role of some sort of CC, buff, debuff, what have you. Now Beatrice, she fulfills two roles in being a good DPSer and utility. Reason being, not only with her SSR, which in the 1-4 pool you could go for, but you get her for free, so I really don't recommend you do that. You can just wait out the 7 days. You're better off going for Iluka or Monica, and I say those two specifically because Chio has a rate up banner currently, and you can just pull her off of there if you like. But Ray is up as well, and Ray, she, again, with physical teams not necessarily being too prevalent in terms of how easy it is to build them as opposed to magic teams, I have to recommend Ray, and this is why for the 1-4 reroll pools I'm not so high on Chio. Monica, she fits in pretty much any team. She is an all-purpose unit, which is why I feel as though she's a higher priority. People may not like her in the beginning simply because, you know, people focus more on damage, but this game isn't about all damage. You get into the later chapters, you'll figure that out pretty quickly, that you can't just sheer force damage your way through content. You have to have a thought process behind building your team. You can't just have all damage, all damage, all damage. You will lose. As the content gets more difficult, you will simply just lose. And it won't be close. Which is why you want to have witches who fulfill multiple roles. If not fulfill one role exceptionally well, to the point where she excels the highest in that category above all the other witches. That would be the only exception. Chio is not one of those exceptions. But, you know, we'll get into her later. She's one of those where you have to invest in her in order for her to be good, and she doesn't get that much better. Yeah, you have to build around her, and it's the investment. Honestly, to me, it's iffy. She works. She definitely works, and what she is designed to do, she works, and we'll get into that later once we, you know, get into teams specifically built around sustain and whatnot. But Beatrice, Heaven's Roses. Normal attacks additionally deal 58% of your total magic attack and magic damage. If the target is silenced, this damage will also affect all enemies within 5 yards. The reason this is important is because Beatrice's active skill summons a single target enemy for 6 seconds, and it deals 900% of your total magic attack damage, which is pretty good, right? And once you get her to the blue witch rank, which I generally just call the blue Saphira, because that's where you're gonna rank her up at. While Beatrice is on the squad, your normal attacks deal 110% of your total magic attack and magic damage. When you're wielding a weapon from Beatrice, the damage factor is increased up to 160%, up from the 110% originally and where it says previously. So Beatrice is a phenomenal compliment, to Magic teams in general. I'm honestly really happy that they just give you her SSR, because she fulfills the role of DPS. She has phenomenal utility, and she is a buffer to magic attack teams. I cannot recommend people enough to just go straight to magic. Go straight to building magic teams, please. It's the easiest thing to build. It'll carry you through a ton of content until they make it where there's some content with incredibly high magic defense, and there's only like certain modes where that is a case. Which, in that case, that's where, if you were, built towards magic attack and you happen to have Chio, she fits well within that realm. That's where you would use, Chio. You can slide her in. But Beatrice, all around, like, phenomenal utility, really good damage. She also buffs your magic team. She's really good. I would recommend that you invest in her. And because you get it for free, it's that much easier. Now, this is the reason why I say for people to either go for Monica and her overall utility in damage mitigation, not so good early game, but later on it gets good, or Luca, where she also fits that role of really good utility, really good DPS. Here's why. So our active skill. Luca summons a testicle that unleashes lightning at a random enemy within 8 yards every 0.5 seconds. The lightning deals 90% of your total magic attack and magic damage. The testicle lasts up for 10 seconds and fires up to 20 times. Her passive. The testicle is empowered. Its attacks paralyze enemies, decreasing their normal attack speed by 38% for 0.6 seconds. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's actually huge. That's quite a bit. Now, let's say you don't go for a Luca. There's quite a bit of utility in her kit overall, her weapons. So the first one that you pretty much should have, if you even like summon once, you should have this: Lightning Forks. For every 3 normal attacks, Lightning Forks unleash a fork of lightning at up to 3 enemies, dealing 130% of your magic attack damage. Meaning, every time you attack 3 times, this procs up to 3 enemies, dealing additional damage around you. So she isn't necessarily AoE, but the fact that she has that in her active skill essentially, and it reduces the normal attack speed of all enemies within that radius. So there's a lot of damage coming in. There's a lot of damage, a lot of utility in just that, in just this rare weapon. Insane. Now, Thunder Pulse is pretty good. It's actually pretty darn good. So the way Thunder Pulse works, Thunder Pulse's normal attacks grant you 3 dodge charges, and it stacks up to 50 times. Honestly, you don't even need to get up to that point. Like, there's no situation where you would even get up to that point. Reason being, when you switch to another weapon, meaning another witch, each one of those charges increases your dodge rate by 10% until it reaches 100. So you only need to attack about 4 times. Not even, honestly, 2 times. Excuse me. Because every singular dodge charge, if I'm getting this correct, it gives you 10. You would only need to do this like twice, and you're good to go. Her normal attacks also reduce the normal attack speed of your target by 7% for 5 seconds, stacking up to 4 times, which is about 28. This effect will pass on nearby enemies when you switch to another weapon. So you couple that in with her passive, you get about, what is it, 66% initially. So you basically neuter them. You basically neuter their attack. And these are just her rare weapons. Luca's pretty insane. Now, her SSR, which, you know, you would be pulling for in the 1-4. Each normal attack deals magic damage equal to 52% of your total magic attack. Every 2 seconds, the next normal attack deals additional magic damage equal to 225% of your total magic attack. Again, this she fulfills the role of DPS. She also fulfills the role of utility. Lot of utility, lot of damage as well, especially when you couple her with Beatrice, who just by being there gives you a boost in your normal attacks on top of what you're already doing. So those two could be your core DPSers, right? Now, utility, as I said, Monica, Ryu, Vera, I also recommend for utility. She has a great kit. She can do true damage with her normal attacks. Really amazing. She has AoE in her active skill, and it's a pretty big radius. It stuns targets for 2 seconds, and it deals 60% of your max HP. So Vera functions incredibly well in a team that stacks HP. The higher your HP is, the more this is going to do. You don't have to put any type of support into this if you don't want to. It does its job quite well on its own for what it is. In her passive, that's where she gets the true damage at now. Her normal attacks deal 210% of the target's physical defense and true damage, which means it ignores the defense, but it cannot critically strike. It doesn't really need to because it does a ton of damage. And the true damage dealt will be no lower than 100% of your total physical attack, but no higher than 74% of your HP. I imagine it works that way to prevent it from scaling to ridiculous amounts. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure Vera's weapon would be, you know, SSR. At that point, she'd probably be one of the craziest units in the game. She's already insane. I highly recommend you invest in Vera as utility. Very good CC, very good AoE, very high stats. Overall, just really good to invest in. There's not too much that she can't do, and what she can't do. Now Rafi, there really isn't a unit in the game currently that does what Rafi does. This is why she is a staple. This is why she's so important, and she will essentially be on most, if not all, of your teams, unless your team is fulfilling a specific role, which we'll get into later. Now, Rafi. Rafila summons the Rain of Mercy and it heals allies within 5 yards, which is pretty large radius. It's about the size of Ryu's active as well, so it's larger than what you think, and it heals you for 12% of your physical or magic attack, whichever one is higher, and it lasts for 5 ticks. It's a pretty massive heal. It's a essential heal for certain content, especially if you aren't the greatest in being able to utilize Monika's switch-in feature or reuse, but we'll get into that. Both of them take a bit of practice to get used to. Now, when you get Rafi to Blue Saphira level, every 2 seconds after you used her active skill, because this is important, you are healed for 10% of your physical or magic attack, whichever one is higher, and it lasts for 4 seconds. So you essentially heal up 40% through the passive, which is huge. And you essentially heal up 100% of your HP through both of them once you have both of them. If you're just starting out, you get 60%, 12 times 5, 60. The passive, 10%, lasts for 4 seconds. That's 4 ticks. It's 40%. Really good. Now, her SR gives you additional healing. We'll get into that in a bit. But the weapon that you'll be starting out with, it reduces the target's physical and magic defense, both of them, by 19% for 5 seconds. While it increases your own physical defense and magic defense by 1%, it stacks up to 3 times. Now, it's pretty good. It's good utility. You're mainly going to be using her for her active skill and a passive skill because they work together. It's pretty good. Now, her SR, just by having it there, increases your dodge rate by 39%, effectively 40%. And for each one of your successful dodges, you heal 3% of your magic or physical attack. It's some good passive healing if you can get it to proc, and we'll get into some team builds later. She's really good. If you're not using Rafi, I'm not sure what you're doing. She's free. You get her for free. It's honestly a crime not to use her. Now, I've covered just about everything. Now, Chio I'm going to cover specifically because she has a different function than any unit in the game, really. She's about the only one who does what she does. So her active is, it's pretty good. it ignores, if you're CC'd, it doesn't matter, you can still activate this, which is great. And you hit the target 3 times for 360% of your total physical attack. That's her active. Now her passive makes her active that much better. Now you can use this one of 2 ways. It works in either, let's say you try to time it with her passive, provided you have her passive, and you just miss it, that's fine. You can still activate her active and get the damage off. But let's say you time it just as you're about to get hit with something massive. This is the one redeeming factor of Chio. If you can time this right, and you have quite a big window, 1.4 seconds is quite a lot of time to time this correctly. If you time this correctly, Chio goes from pretty mediocre in most cases to absolutely insane. The only reason I don't recommend Chio versus Monica, Aluka, and Beatrice is for this reason specifically. You have to time this. She does consistent damage otherwise, but this is what gives her, like, you know, this is her bread and butter. You can time this with unavoidable attacks from elites, you know, bosses, and you will not take damage. You will riposte this damage, and you will deal physical damage equal to 2,400 of the damage that you blocked. That is insane. That is insanity. That is absolutely ridiculous. It is absolutely insane. This here, literally, this right here is what makes Chio one of the best units in the game, but only if you are able to consistently activate this. It'll take some time to practice. If you practice this and you get this down, again, you have a ridiculous amount of time. Once you get her to level 23, to get her passive, she does insane. She does insane damage. Like, investing in Chio is not bad. It's just, it will take some time, and you may be turned off from the fact that it takes so long for her to come online. But she is well worth the investment. That much I can assure you of. Now, you can build a team around her, and I recommend that you build a team around her because she is worth building into. But for the purpose of this video, we will go directly to magic damage because it's the most prevalent, it's the easiest to build. Physical is a bit more difficult, and they have a bit more niche units. It's honestly, the way it's set up, there are some really good physical attacking units. The issue is, one of the best ones in Emily, you shouldn't expect to have her, like, unless you're pay to play or you wait for her banner and you get lucky. Don't worry about it. For the sake of this video, let's just get straight into the team building. It's already gone pretty long as is, but this is more or less an all-purpose video. Now, this right here is Ray in my DPS. Reason being is her SR weapon functions the same way that Fork Lightning does for Aluka. Rafila, obviously, she has amazing utility. That's my utility unit right there. slash healer. She fulfills 2 different roles. Rei, for the most part, is just, you know, she's just damage. Ryu, she is mainly a damage mitigator slash healer upon kills. That's the way her ultimate functions, her active skill. For that time period in which her AoE is active, everything in that bubble that is attacking you does reduce damage, and anything that you kill in that AoE in that time, you gain 6% HP back, which is quite a bit. So she is utility. Not in the form of CC, but in the form of damage mitigation slash healing. Now, Monica fills all 3, but her main focus, at least on her shield, is damage mitigation, followed by the CC in her active skill, which is huge because it does tremendous damage based off of physical attack. Her passive also will mitigate damage and also riposte that damage, and it's based off of your physical attack and your physical defense. And again, if you take 2 incoming attacks through her, when her barrier is active, you can switch weapons and it will also stun them while also giving you a small heal. Pretty huge. It depending on how many attacks you take in that time, it can either be a small heal or it can be a pretty massive heal. This again takes timing. If you have her super rarity, it has insane amounts of lifesteal. It has really good amounts of lifesteal. She then fulfills the role of DPS slash healer, and also having utility in her active skill. For all intents and purposes, Monica is one of the best units in the game. She just is. Monica fits. If you have her SSR and you get lucky enough to get her SR, she fulfills whichever role you need her to fill. Whatever the team needs, she can fulfill that. She's really good. That's just what it is. She's really good. Rei is really good in dealing damage. Same as Chio, except Rei is just better to build into, simply because of the fact that she has magic attack. And if you'll notice, Ryu has, she's balanced. Same as Monica. So they fit in either team. But Ryu is better on a magical attacking team because her abilities scale off of such. But do you need to? No. She's generally an all-purpose. Same in the sense of Monica. Monica is just vastly better. She outclasses her in just about every aspect. There is nothing that Ryu does that Monica cannot do better when used properly. Ryu is a bit safer, but she still takes just as much investment and practice to get the best of her kit. That being said, really good team. It has sustain, it has damage mitigation, it has damage. All around, just a very solid team. Now, there's another form of this team that you can run that is slightly more on the offensive side in adding Kiryu. Now, Kiryu fulfills a lot of roles here. She has really good damage. She honestly does more damage than most units in the game, and you also get her for free. You just get her for free. Please, please, please invest in her. You do not need Ray. Kiryu will carry you through the game. She just will. She will carry you through the game. She will carry you through the game. You don't need Aluka. You don't need Ray. If you don't want them, you can just run Kiryu, and you can run Beatrice for that buff and magic attack damage, and she will hit for a ton. She just will. She will hit for a ton. So you take Ray out if you want, and you have Beatrice's SSR. Your team can look something like this. Let's say you don't have Monica. You have Ryu or something like that. Hell, let's say you don't even have Ryu. Claudia is a really good option. Not only does she buff, but she also stops time, which allows you to get in more damage, stall for your heal and Raffi. She also she's just really good. She can fill out a team as well. Like, this team can work for you. This team is free to play. This team right here is free to play. The other teams that I mentioned were not free to play. You would have to pull for Ray and pull her. But for all intents and purposes, you can run this team. You can run, let's say you don't want to run for whatever reason, Kiryu. Free to play team right here. Does insane damage. Will get you through the game, through content just fine. Another decent buffer to mention, Skull. Skull's good. Let's say you don't want a buffer. Vera. Again, Vera's ridiculous. Same thing. Free to play team. Really, really good. Really, really good. There's no reason for you not to use Vera. She fits on a lot of teams. She's just really good. There's really no reason to use her. Excuse me, to not use her. Now, let's say you went with Chio. You can, this is personally a team that I like to use. The main focus is Chio. This team, the main focus is Chio. Reason being is you're not looking, this team isn't flashy. It's not going to do insane amounts of damage that isn't through Chio and her active once you have that. But Chio does consistent damage regardless of if you have her Luciferied out or not. Even early on, she does really good damage, consistent damage. That coupled with Raffi, she just does really good damage overall. There's, again, the damage mitigation between Ryu and Monica as well. Let's say you didn't go for Monica for whatever reason. Again, boom, Vera. This team has really good AoE. It has a stun, so you can recover when Chio's weapon is gone for the moment. Raffi, same thing, utility, increasing your defenses and also lowering the enemy's defenses. Ryu also being really good to couple with Vera, simply because you activate Ryu's active. You then activate Vera's to kill a bunch of mobs. You heal up quite a bit, gives you time to recover. Let's say you don't have Raffi's active available. You're able, again, a lot of sustain in this team. A whole lot of sustain in this team. Chio is not bad by any means. It's just You have to know what you're doing in order to get the maximum potential out of her, the maximum damage output. And if you can do that, she does quite well. And you don't necessarily need to build a physical team to do such, to, you know, meet that quota. I believe that's about it, really. 2 DPS, 1 healer and Rafi, and 1 utility that fulfills quite a bit of roles, and you're pretty much good to go. There's not too much. Not too much to it outside of that. You can run this team as well. This team has everything. It has AoE, Envera, it has CC, Envera, Monica. It has phenomenal single target damage in Monica Chio. It has really good utility in healing, debuffing / buffing, and Rafi. With that being said, guys, that pretty much is it. You can run a team however you want. You can run niche teams if you please. It is entirely up to you. There's not really a bad team. The only teams I would consider not as good is a team that has several units fulfilling the same role and no units, no witches fulfilling that role that you are missing. The only exception to this would be a pretty, this team's pretty niche, so you would run Claudia, you would run Emily, you would run Akira. This is like way later into the game. This is so late into the game. So Akira, Emily, Claudia, Rafi for extra healing. What this team essentially does is it's based around Emily. Reason being is because the way she works, her SSR, when you critically strike, you deal an additional 228% of your total physical attack in true damage. This is insane. This, if you're ever so lucky to get Emily, on top of that be able to get Akira as well, that team will literally eat elites alive. It will eat any enemy alive. They will not survive. She just does way too much damage. It's actually insane. It's actually ridiculous how much damage she can output. It's just otherworldly how much damage she can output when you build the correct team. But yes, guys, that being said, that is it. That concludes this all-purpose team building guide. If you have any more questions or suggestions on what videos I should make, please feel free to leave them in the comments or message me on Discord at SpartanD3554. Love you all much, and I will see you all next time.